Good morning, good night, good afternoon. Excellent. Let's just mute you guys here so I don't hear all those sweet noises in there. So yesterday we did a lot of the pores detail, right? And turns out that my pores are too small. I did a lot of it. I posted the progress. It was actually cool as an exercise for me. But just like we were saying yesterday, it turns out actually that my pores are too tiny because I was not paying attention. I was just yapping my mouth yesterday when I was sculpting in front of you guys, and then I kind of like got them too small. But not to worry, it took me only an hour and a half, so to redo it, since they're gonna be bigger, it should take me around another 40 minutes or something. So restarting where we stopped it yesterday. Actually, I was looking at some of the videos from the past class, and I realized that just like in this one here, I think just like the previous one, I think this one here are going to do the same thing, which is basically instead of like going and jumping right into the wrinkles details, right, and keep going a little bit further with the sculpture, I think it's better for me to just like open up the entire thing about how to export the maps to Maya, from ZBrush to Maya, what are my settings for displacement maps and everything. And then today, I think what we're gonna do, we're gonna export everything that we have in here to Maya. And then I'm gonna be talking about the skin shader. I'm gonna be using the latest skin shader that I have, which is the one I used for the Stan Winston portrait. So basically like the same one. Let's see if I can get it.
We haven't shared your screen.
Yep, I gotta be okay. Yep. Let me just do this before we go further. Thank you. So let me just go back here and then switch back. So let's do, okay, so I have my projects. Let me just get this stuff here going. So yeah, I think it's gonna be cool to just like give you like all the settings for the skin so you guys can start playing with it. Because from the get-go, I always like to have like the model like rendered, like I said before, right? So I can actually start experimenting with things and seeing how the detail is starting out in, it's like translating from ZBrush to Maya. So I'm going to be doing this today with you guys so you can actually have something to play with, which is going to be pretty cool, which is like the skin shader and all the settings that I use for it. So let's do this first. So let me just open a bunch of images here. Those guys that I normally... Okay, so let's get, okay, one, there's a bunch in here. I don't need to open up. Oh, let's open everything. So this skin shader here is a modification in relation to the skin shader used for the Dick Smith portrait and the Rick Baker one that I had some time ago. I'm sorry. Because this one uses an additional layer of specular, which is to create this nice like diffuse kind of like spread out reflection. So I'm using like the coat specular instead of like the clear coat thing that normally people use just like for super shiny objects. I'm using it actually with a very diffuse value, very rough value to create this soft reflection. So it's kind of like you have this speck that's a little bit sharper, and then you have the soft speck that's basically the coat that I'm using for it. So I'm going to be showing like this exact same shader network. I just exported from the scene, and then we're going to be exploring it and showing all the nodes and all that stuff. And then obviously we don't have any textures painted or anything, so we're not going to be seeing how things are connected just yet. I'm going to be just like showing some of the nodes I have just as a information kind of thing, but we're going to be plugging just the displacement map and using the same shader settings that I have here, but without any map connections at this point. And we're also going to do some experimentations with ZBrush exporting from from a HD geometry, just to show you how show you guys how it works. One thing I didn't mention yesterday is that if you never use HD geometry, let's say you want to do like a preview of the entire thing, instead of like pressing A while holding holding your your cursor right on top of some part of the object, you can just rest the cursor outside of it. You just press A, and it kind of renders like a preview for you of the entire thing. So if you have the entire face sculpted, you're going to see all the detail in there. So it's just like a nice way if you want to, you know, post a preview of the entire thing, like on your Instagram or whatever, you know. So it kind of renders the entire thing. So that's basically what I covered yesterday. And I might be able to actually just get away with this stuff because, like I said, his type of skin is that type of, you know, it's like very old, kind of like almost like a film, like I mentioned, right? Like super thin with mostly like, it's fairly smooth. So you're not going to see a lot of the pores, but most likely going to erase a lot of this detail and just redo it after the class. I'm not going to torture you guys doing the same thing again, but you saw the little video, you saw me sculpting part of it yesterday. So it's going to be more of the same. So one thing that I did with the scene here, I actually brought some of the other stuff I had from my Stan Winston model. Since they share the same topology, I was able to bring stuff like this, which we're going to explore next week. This is just a preview. So, you know, I have my specular map in there. I have, you know, it's like the color of the melanin for the hair. And then I have my bump height map. This one is actually used for controlling the roughness of the skin. So it looks like this. It's just like a black and white map. So this stuff we're going to be exploring next week, so don't worry about it. I'm just like saying that I brought those ones in here just to reuse some of the stuff I already painted. As for the skin color, I'm going to paint everything from scratch again. It's a different type of skin, but this is basically like it's Stan Winston's skin applied to this model here. That's how weird it looks. And then I have the teeth, obviously. Since this guy's a smile, I'm going to have to modify the teeth. Let me just get this like that, and then that's the teeth I have for Stan. So I'm going to be modifying it as well. But let's go back to what matters here, which is this model. And then what am I going to do here first? I'm going to go to the lowest resolution. And there are a couple of things to talk about this. I mean, like some people prefer to actually use like a, you know, so just like this scalp. Basically, like you just like cut a piece of the geometry and use the scalp, and then you grow the hair and groom everything into that scalp. You don't use the actual mesh, right? Sometimes you have to do that if you want to use certain you know, specialized things in XGen that basically they do not support UDIMs. So you need like to have everything in a single map. And in that case, the only way to do that's by having a scalp, because obviously our mesh has multiple UDIMs in here. So there's not a lot we can do about that. But in my case, I mean, I know that you guys, like a lot of you have already like ways of doing stuff. You know, it's like every class we have someone like say like, oh, there was some tip in here. You can do it in a certain way. But I'm just showing the way I do stuff. And obviously, if there's anything we can do, you know, to improve that or do in a different way, it's totally up to you guys. But that's basically the way I do it stuff. So when I export my mesh, instead of exporting the lowest resolution, which is fairly squarish, right? You have like very low poly like that. I want to make sure that my hair sticks right against the surface. So I'd rather export like something that has a little bit more geometry. So instead of like the lowest resolution, 17,000 in my case, it's going to be one subdivision level more than that. So one higher. And then I'm going to export this one here at 69.306. I'm going to export this one as my base mesh that I'm going to be using in Maya. So I'm going to click export, and then I'm going to go to my OBJ, and then I can say array MR, that's medium res, that's the way I named them, and then 6. I keep going up. And then when I do this, every single map I export with that same number. So we are at iteration number 6 here. So MR6, I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to export another one with the iteration at the lowest level. So this one is going to be lower resolution, so LR, and then number 6 as well. So now I have one in medium resolution, which is like one subdivision more than that, right? And then the lowest resolution. So to export those maps, there is one thing I noticed like a long time ago. This was actually in production. We are trying to export some maps, and then we have, for example, like we just imported a new mesh to replace the original one we had in there. And we are just detailing stuff inside of the ears, for example, right? Like this character we had. And then every time we exported the displacement, instead of exporting just the difference of the new stuff, just the little pores inside of the years, it was actually exporting the whole forms of the year. So there was kind of like a double transformation thing. It was actually capturing a lot of the broader forms instead of like just the fine detail, although it was supposed to calculate just the difference between those two meshes. And then I had a call with Ofer, the guy who actually programmed and created the ZBrush, right? And I was on the phone with him, and I asked him, like, so how does this work? I mean, like, we just need the difference of it, and we are getting some mid resolution stuff that we don't want. And then he told me this workflow, and that's basically what I mentioned, like, at the summit when I went, like, last year. So if you watch the video, you probably captured that, which is a little weird to me to understand, but it makes sense in his own head. And he actually produces the result that we want. So that's why I keep doing it. I don't even know if at this point ZBrush already has that kind of built in. You don't need to do that anymore. But I always use the same technique. So I'm going to be showing exactly how I do it. So before I do the export of the mesh, the maps, you remember that I export the mid resolution and then this very same low resolution mesh, right? So I'm going to go to my morph target. And the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to delete any morph target I have. And then there are basically 3 steps. It's store, switch, import. So I'm going to do it now. So store, switch, and then import. And I'm going to import the exact same model. It's not going to look like much. But what this did in theory is that this saved a buffer object. It's basically exactly the same object. So it's going to force ZBrush to export just the difference between the 2 meshes, which in this case here should be just a fine detail on top of it. So you should not have like double transformations and a lot of stuff baked in that is not supposed to. So that way it actually exports like a one-to-one version of whatever you have in ZBrush back to Maya. So if we go to the export settings here, we're going to go to Z plugin, and you're going to go to multi-map exporter. And then here I have on the texture from Polypaint and displacement. I'm going to turn off the texture right now because I don't have anything painted just yet. So next week when you do the painting, we're going to be exporting with this. So we're going to turn it off for now, displacement. If you don't have anything set just yet with your settings in there, let's set up the whole thing from scratch. So before we start, you're going to go to export options. You're going to expand this tab. And then under file names, you're going to look for those options in here. So you're going to go to TIFF is the default. So that's basically what you're going to be seeing in there. I always use this one, overwrite existing files, just in case, because, you know, if you're exporting with the same subtool name, you should overwrite whatever is in there. And then by default, ZBrush has this at UUV, something like that, or this one maybe, one of those. So you're going to be clicking this button here until it switches to UDIM, right? So now you have UDIM in there. And then everything else you keep the default. So TIFF, overwrite, and then UDIM here, and everything else is default. So okay. I'm gonna go down here, and you're gonna notice like this by default it's set at 4K map, but we're exporting something for HD, so I rather crank this slider all the way to 4K. So I'm gonna slide this all the way to 4K, which doesn't have a preset, but it goes all the way to 8K, right? So check that one out. And then let's see, under displacement map here. Oh, before I do this, so that trick that I just did with the store, switch, import thing, it only works because of this this button here. So make sure that you click this one, the switch morph target, because that's how ZBrush is gonna compare the current object with whatever is stored in the morph target when you click the switch, right? Like in this button here. So basically, like anything that's in the buffer, there's going to be compared with the object. In this case, it's going to be the same object, so it should export just the difference. And then remember that I said I'm going to export the subdivision level 2, which is like the 64,000 polys instead of the 17,000. That's the lowest here. So I'm going to match that, because when I export that model at the subdivision level 2, I want to make sure that's the model I have in Maya. So when I apply the displacement maps, I want ZBrush to calculate just the difference. You know, it's like starting from subdivision level 2 and calculating the displacements from that point on, instead of like subdivision level 1, which is the default, right? So I'm going to switch that one to 2. I'm going to turn on adaptive for more accurate results. Although I'm not sure if it with HD is going to do, you know, going to create a big difference in here, but that's the settings I always use. You know, so there's even an amazing tutorial that was on the internet for a long time, and he was using this, and he said like he explained why it's a better idea to use it. So that's why I adopted, but I never tested to see if it does anything different. You know, in the DP subpixing here, I'm cranking all the way to 4, which is just to create that smoothness in the displacement if you need it. You might be able to get away with like 2 or even less than that, but I always use the same setting, so I'm gonna keep it like that. And then another thing that you're gonna see by default in your ZBrush is that the mid level here, which is the 50% gray of your displacement map, is gonna be at 0.55, obviously, because the 50% gray. But Arnold by default uses the 0 level at the 0. So basically, like it starts from completely black, right? Obviously, if you're using 16-bit maps, if you start with 0 in here, you're not going to get information going down, just like the stuff going up. But because we are using 32-bit maps, it's going to calculate just fine because you have like a ton of information, and you can actually calculate negative values, right? So it can go below black. So if you start the mid level at 0 here, don't worry about it because we are using 32 bits and then EXR. So instead of TIFF, we are using EXR. It's the most precise you know, map format that we can use here, 32 bits and everything. So and everything else is the default. So don't change anything here. So it's going to be scale 1, 32. So you can even copy this entire tab the way it is right now. Let me just double check if everything's correct. So there's level 2, DP. Yeah, that's correct. So now we can actually export this mesh. Before you do that, I'm gonna just rename it because it's okay, because I already re-imported the mesh. He actually named the subtool with that name of the OBJ I just imported. So that's what I want. If you didn't do anything, for example, if you're doing something else, for example, like exporting the specular map, for example, in this case here, we just name it. If this is specular, we just click rename. Just say like spec 6, matching that number, right? And then this one would be like the melanin 6. But we're gonna see this stuff like next week, so don't worry about it. And then this one would be like bump height 6. So every time I export maps from those objects, it's basically gonna name the maps with that name that you see in there automatically. So I'm gonna click this one again, Ray LR6. And I'm gonna just click create all maps. So let's export our first set of maps in here. And while ZBrush is doing that, it should take about 6 to 7 minutes in my calculation. We're gonna do, so I'm gonna export everything to this folder here that's called source images. That's the default folder that Maya looks for images in. And all those folders, if you remember correctly, when we set up our project, Maya created everything by default, right? So we went through this already. So except for the references folder, obviously, the ZBrush folder, and I think that was about it. Everything else was created by Maya. So I'm just gonna double click source images and I'm gonna export everything into there. So that's gonna be my first set of maps, like displacement maps. So it's gonna, you know, process is gonna be much faster than the regular subdivision levels. And we're going to be able to test those pores, and you're going to see how tiny they are, and that's why I have to make them bigger. So we're going to switch back to Maya while ZBrush is working in there. So this is from last week, right? Like we didn't touch this one. We still have the old model in here. And then it's going to change a lot probably when I bring the new one. So let's see what we have. So this model here is probably it's a higher resolution, so we don't need it. And this is the clay shader that we created last week, right? It doesn't have a lot of fanciness to it. It's just those settings I created plus some changes in color and difference in spec that I tweaked. But it's basically the same shader we created starting from a preset called clay in here, right? Clay. And then we changed it to look more like skin. But obviously it could go straight like to a skin, preset in here and start from there. But we did the hard way. So I'm gonna just delete this model altogether because it doesn't represent my model anymore. I'm gonna bring the brand new one. So let's start with this. You remember I said before, I'm gonna repeat it here because it's very important. If you don't have this set yet, it's better to set it right now. Just a second, my Maya is thinking here. I click and it's kind of like stopped working. Okay, let's go again. Go Maya, you can do it. OBJ, so if you click OBJ, make sure that when you scroll all the way down here, it's set to single object. Otherwise, if you have polygroups and stuff, it might split your model in multiple objects. So single object, if that's click, you can just click edit and then save your settings. Just make sure that the next time it doesn't happen, right? You don't need to do this again. I'm gonna click import. And then I'm gonna go to my OBJ folder. And I'm gonna click my ray low res, not actually the mid res, right? The low res is the one, the super low res in ZBrush, but I'm using the mid res because I'm gonna grow all the hair in the same mesh instead of using a separate one. If you have in your workflow, you have more experience with XGen, feel free to create a scalp if you want. But for the purpose of this class, I'm gonna be grooming everything in the same object. Because to me, it's easier to just like, if I want to re-import a model after a bunch of iterations with sculpting and everything, it just pops right into place and I don't have to worry about anything else. So I'm going to import this one, the mid resolution. Let's see what I get here. A little slow because it's rendering in the background, obviously. So Maya is a little choppy. So let's go to my other perspective here. Remember, this one is the one that's locked. And then this one here is the one that I have some more freedom to play with. So that the other one is the one I use to render. This one is the one I goof around with. So once we have those maps exported, things are gonna get a little faster here. But for now, we still can do some work. So I just imported this one from ZBrush straight the way you saw I did. And then a few things we have to set up, right? So the first thing is like Arnold needs to know what type of object this is and how you want to subdivide this mesh when you are rendering things. So you're going to have to go to every single object you import into Maya, any new object, you're going to set up a few things. So the first thing is like you're going to click your object, you're going to press Control-A, right, to see the attribute editor. And then your attribute editor, normally the second tab, the first one you're gonna have the translate, rotate, scale, all the transformation stuff. The second tab, you're gonna have more information here. And then if you scroll down all the way, you're gonna see Arnold in there, right? So we're gonna click Arnold and gonna expand it. And then there are a bunch of things here you're gonna see first. And then if you keep scrolling, the first ones you're gonna have to change is this one here. I think I mentioned before. The SSS set name is important because if you have like multiple objects and you want to make sure that the transition between them is seamless when you look at the renders, for example, like the eyes in relation to the skin, right? Like if you want to make sure that they read as something kind of continuous, that is not like a, it's like you don't have like a dark line separating them. You have to make sure that everything is inside of the same subsurface node, right? Like it's the same, not node, but the set, right? So normally the name I give, and that's something I name just to remember. You can use whatever you want. Yeah, I just call shared SSS. And this one, I add the same name for every single object that I bring to make sure that they all match the same. And then when you render, you get like a perfect transition. I'm gonna open later the page for Arnold 5. They have in the manual, they describe exactly what I'm talking about here. And of course, like they describe everything about all those shaders. They are very, very specific and very detailed about the instructions they have in there. It's very cool, actually, the online page they have. So the first thing which we changed here was the shared SSS. Now let's expand the subdivision. So under subdivision, that's basically the place where we're gonna tell Arnold how you wanna subdivide this mesh at render time, right? So let's make sure that that's not gonna help either if it's rendering in the background. So I just turned it off. So let's go to subdivision here, and then under type, I'm just gonna switch to Catmull Clark. And then the iterations here, this is something for you guys to test, okay? In my own test, like if I do 4 iterations at this resolution here, I can actually get plenty of detail, and the displacement can get very specific. But obviously, if I crank from 4 to 5, I get even more detail. For example, like if you want to make sure that the pores are super detailed and the scatter is going inside of them and the folds are being represented at like the very miniature level, sometimes it's better to use like the higher number you can, the best, right? But for in terms of like the speed of rendering and all this stuff, I would say like 3 would be kind of like the minimal I would use to represent the pores, because we are dealing with HD geometry. But 4 to me is kind of like an ideal sweet spot. 5, if you want to do super close-ups of the skin and stuff, I would use 5 probably. But 4 should do a good job overall, you know. And so from raster, I changed to object space for adaptive. And then from UV smoothing, I switched to linear here. Because if you remember in ZBrush, when I see like it took 7 minutes and 40 seconds to export 5 8K maps. Not too bad, huh? It's pretty awesome. So I already have all the maps exported and everything, but just as a reminder here, if you go to geometry, remember when I was subdividing this mesh here, I didn't have any SUV or anything, right? Everything was subdivided without it. So that means like everything is very squarish and I just need to use UV smoothing linear. Obviously, if you're using like a smooth UV, then you're gonna have to match that with whatever you're having here. So if you use the SUV button and then doing in the export of the multi-map exporter, you're using the smooth UVs as well, probably the borders are still locked. So you have to try here. Either use a smooth or you can just like pin borders. So if you use pin borders, it should be square at the borders, but then smooth inside, right? And then smooth should be smooth all the way across. So you have to test. But my pipeline is just linear because that's completely seamless stuff. You know, it's like I don't need to worry about anything. And then for displacement attributes, that's the default. So if you have a height of 1, you should get the 1-to-1 translation from ZBrush to Maya using those settings that I show you guys in ZBrush. And then the auto bump is a very cool one, right? Because that's basically like if you have something that's super detailed. Let's say this model has 72 million polygons, right, at the HD level. But if I'm subdividing this, just this, like, let's say like 3 times, I'm not gonna get to that level. But in that case, you just can click in enable auto bump. And then the auto bump actually is gonna shift a lot of the super fine detail and you're gonna turn them into bumps, right? So you're gonna get like the 3 subdivision levels or 4 like I have here, to actually deform and to break the silhouette. So it's going to actually displace those things. But then to generate the fine detail, anything that's left is going to be pushed to the auto bump, right? So it's going to become a bump map. And then that's about it, like for the attributes of the object. This other thing here, it's interesting because this one says opaque. It's right the first parameter here, a checkbox for Arnold. And this one is interesting because you tell Arnold if the object is opaque or transparent. In this case here, obviously the object is not transparent, but if you're bringing the sclera and the cornea later on, we have everything in a single object. We're going to be talking about the eyes in one of the next classes or lessons. And so we're going to be turning this one off because we're going to make sure that the shadows are going to be completely transparent, right? But in this case here, we don't need to change it, so opaque, it's good. So that's all we need for this guy. So now let's go to the hypershade, which again, you open it using this little sphere in here, right? In the top. Or if you go to Windows and then rendering editors and then you click hypershade, it's the same. So just gonna open it. And then here, I just have like the only things I have is the default stuff. I have displacement I can eliminate for now. And then just the clay shader that we assigned in the last class, right? So that's all it is. So let's import this shader here. That's the shader that I brought from Stan Winston. Switch to file type to Maya scenes. And then under, I believe is under scenes. Let's try that, scenes. I have this Stan skin shader here. So what I did to export this was basically, it's if you want to export anything from the hypershade, let me just expand this one. Stan skin, then graph, input, output. So that should graph for you. So if you have any shader already created here, you can just select the entire thing other than the top node, right? Because that's going to be created anyway. Just select everything else, and you can just say File, Export Selected Network, and then you export in either MA or MB, Maya ASCII or binary, and then you should have access here. So that's what I did from my other scene and just imported back here. So let's export this shader network here a little bit without going too much into detail with the maps, because we don't have the maps to play with just yet. But you can see how small the shader network is. You know, it's like there's lots of tutorials in there. You can see like those shader networks get so big. You know, it's like a ton of nodes. And my philosophy is always like to do as simple as possible. You know, it's like I believe like as artists, you know, it's like we like challenges and everything. We like to be technical and everything. But I mean, like if you're getting the results without going too crazy with stuff, I see no reason why to, you know, complicate things, right? So if I'm getting some results like this with a very simple shader network, to me is working fairly nicely, you know? So if I want anything as an improvement on top of that, then I can study, you know, it's like, okay, what type of node I can add to actually break up the, you know, it's like, or filter the subsurface scattering in a certain spot and really paint things with more care. But if things in general, just by using a simple shader network, give me a nice result, I have no reason to actually add a lot of stuff that's just going to complicate. And every time you complicate things, the more nodes you have, more likely is you're going to spend like a huge amount of time trying to bug track those things if you get in trouble. You know, if you have some trouble with the shader later on, you know, it's just to track where the problem is going to be a torture. But you have something simple like that, you know, just it's going to be easy to just find everything. So the first thing you're going to do, you're going to click this guy here, going to click the main node. And then I'm going to just see like he expanded in here and expanded on the side here, my attribute editor. I'm just going to click copy tab right here. So that's going to pop out. So now I can play around with anything I want, and this is going to be always visible in here. So we can actually explore the whole shader network. Again, like there are not a lot of stuff that I can talk about the maps other than just showing a preview, which is like, if you observe here, I mean, I don't have a lot of stuff plugged. I have a specular color, right? I have a specular map plugged. And then that's what it is. The subsurface coloring here, what I have a remap color, which is a node from Maya. Again, next week you're going to be talking about that. And then I have the color map. So my albedo is plugged to the remap color and then plugged to the subsurface color. I have nothing plugged in my subsurface radius. And then I have a bump map, which is basically using two maps. One is AI noise. That's I'm using for my micro bump or micro displacement or whatever you want to do. You can either use like the maps I pointed you guys to from that website, or paint your own, or use like something fractal like this. You know, I like this one because it's pretty seamless. I don't have any tiling problems or anything. And then I have my bump height map here plugged to it. So that's basically all I'll use. Like it's all together like 4 maps, right? And a few nodes. So that's about it. Super simple stuff. So let's explore this skin shader. And before I do that, let me just open this. There is this this website. So if you just search for Arnold 5, and then you just say, let's say SSS, something like that. So we're gonna see like the first link gonna pop is Subsurface Arnold. So that's basically like their manual, right? And that's where we're gonna find all the information here for everything concerning skin and all that stuff. So if you keep scrolling this, obviously I want you guys to go in there and explore this entire thing. They're gonna be talking about like the depth, and if you have like flipped normals, how the render is gonna happen. It's gonna look pretty dark like that, right? You know, opposition to this one, that's the normal direction. And then you have like all those presets. They say like, you know, it's like if you use this in a certain color, blah, 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 the radius, you know, is how to control and what's the effect that causes. It's very cool to actually go there and explore. But if you go down here, right here at this spot, they say with rendering skin, you should use a value like 1, 0.35, and 0.2, right? To create like this, it's basically like it's a very saturated peach color. And that's like the default color that they suggest using for skin. And that's basically the same color I use for my renders. So if you can just do that, so I'm just gonna move this to the side here so I can copy it. And then, so let's look at the color I have. So Let's go in parts here first, explaining how this whole shader thing works, right? So first thing I'm going to expand the subsurface color, right? And before I start here, actually, let's do a reproduction of this entire thing, right? Let's start with from scratch so you can actually understand what I'm doing, and then do it with me while you're watching the video. So the main shader for Arnold is called this AI standard surface, which is like a Uber shader. So it has everything in it. You can create metal, skin, everything with it, right? So I'm gonna click the AI standard surface, and I'm gonna name it something I can understand. For example, ray skin, right? And that's my new shader, right? So I'm gonna assign it to the object already, so I don't need to do this later. So I'm gonna click the object, go back here to my shader, right click, and then say assign material to viewport. And then you can also, it's like a middle click and just drag and drop if you want, whatever however you want to use the, to assign your shader. So now it's assigned and basically has this node created in there, right? And it has nothing other than the default values in here. But now we're gonna actually clone what we had from the previous shader, which is this one, this tab here, right? So I'm gonna click this guy here again, and you see there's a ray skin, right? So I'm gonna expand it, and we're gonna look at those values right here. So I can actually copy this tab as well, so I can have like side by side. So this is the old one here, stan skin, you can see right there, and then we have the ray skin. So we're gonna be comparing the two of them just to see what's going on. So you see, like the first thing is this base here, and this base here is basically just your diffuse channel. And the way it works is like this. If you expand your subsurface in here, if you have 0 as subsurface, all the information when you render is going to come from the diffuse. So it's going to take into account all the information here. So if you have a color in here, for example, you have like a, it's like a blue or something like that, right? So basically, it's going to pay attention to this. It's going to completely ignore the subsurface, right? But this is a mixer, actually. So if you crank this one, let's say if you put that 50%, now Maya at Arnold is going to calculate a combination of 50% subsurface plus 50% rough diffuse, right? So it's going to definitely look like a bluish kind of model plus whatever color you add to your subsurface color and then radius. But in our case here, since we are using 1 for the subsurface, that means that it's completely ignoring that. So you see what I do here? See the color of the model in there? It goes from blue all the way to white because it's actually blending all the way to completely subsurfacey. So basically this whole entire section here can be ignored, right? Using the settings I use for my model. Now, if you're trying to do something like create the effect of like a rubber, for example, that you get the subsurface, but also some of the diffuse in it, then you're probably gonna play with this mixer in here and add some more information in here, some color, and then mix the two of them. But in this case here, we are dealing with this with the skin, and we're gonna go completely subsurfacey with it. And then first thing you're gonna do, so we're gonna close the space in both of here because you can completely ignore it, right? For specular, by default, I'm using 0.850 instead of 1, so it's not cranked all the way up. And obviously, if your model has more or less oily skin, right, depends on the type of character you have, you're going to be playing with those. For the roughness here, I'm actually using something very, very shiny, so 0.120. So the lower you get, the more like glassy you get, right? So the reflection here at 0, 0 should be like a complete mirror, right? And if you go higher and higher, that becomes like a very diffuse specular. Almost like very, very diffuse. The specular are going to spread a lot. So I'm going to keep this one at 0.120. So it's very, very shiny. Because if you look at the macro photography of skin, it looks very, very shiny at micro level, right? But then when you see in the context, because there's so much breakup in the surface with the pores themselves and then the micro breakups in between and everything, it becomes diffuse. But if you look really closely, they are very shiny. And then for the index of refraction here, I'm using 1.55. This index of refraction, obviously, if you have a transparent object, is going to take into account that. So if I'm using like just the sclera for the eye, I'm probably going to use like a value of 1.36, something like that. Because this is really going to control the amount of refraction in a transparent object. But in this case here, since it's not transparent, this is also going to control the amount of specularity. So let's say you want to go super specky with some kind of surface you're working on. Not skin necessarily, but like super plasticky or glassy surface. You can actually, if you maxed out the weight here at 1 and you cannot go further than that, you can actually use this index of refraction to actually crank this number. You can use like 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to use, and that's going to make very, very shiny. You know, it's like going to be super glossy. So you can use that one. So I already meshed that. Color, I'm not going to use anything at this point because we don't have a map for specular just yet. Transmission, we don't have anything, so ignore that one. It's not a transparent object yet. We're gonna use transmission just for the eyes actually. And then for the weight, again, all the way cranked to 1 because it's completely subsurfacey. And then the radius, I'm gonna just mimic that color that we saw in the manual. And to do that, you have those color modes, right? You have the HSV here, and you have RGB from 0 to 1 and RGB from 0 to 255. So this is the one we want, 0 to 1. So I can actually copy those values. So the R, they are mentioning like, so red is all the way to 1. Green is going to be 0.35. And then blue, they're saying is 0.2. That's basically the peachy color that you get for the subsurface. It's not like you don't need to go full red to get that redness inside of the nostrils, for example, if you have a strong light or behind the ears. This color should do it. Because it actually filters, you know, it's like I don't know how it does exactly, but it uses like the redness of it. It's filtered in a different way. It's kind of like each color penetrates in a different ratio, right? So the radius here, if you have a peachy color like that, that means you're actually considering the fat underneath the skin and all the other, you know, types of tissues mixed with the blood, right? And you get like this mix of things. So it's kind of like this kind of color that you get at the end. And the trick here that you should pay attention as well, obviously, if you're using the world scale for the model, which is the latest model I gave you guys, is the world scale one. The scale I find the most accurate for my own taste, but again, everything is a very artistic approach here, is 0.120. But if you feel like it's too scattery, you can reduce it. If you feel that's not scattery enough, you crank the number. But that's my ballpark for you guys to start. Right? That's my result when I render my stuff, and it looks pretty okay. So the random walk, by default, that's basically what the Arnold had. But then thanks to this Arnold 5, let me just go back here. Thanks to Arnold 5, let's see, Arnold 5 download. It's version Autodesk, so it's gonna go to this website here that's called arnoldrenderer.com and then Arnold download. So the latest version of Maya to Arnold is 3.211, and that's the one you want to get. If you're using Maya 2017, 18, or 19, you get that version. Obviously, you're going to need an account on your area to be able to download this, unless you find a different way. It's not my business, but you know, it's like that's how I do it. I just go to area and then download the file from here. And then once you install this one, then instead of like having just random walk, another option is going to show up here that's called random walk version 2. And this one is much more accurate, you know, it's like especially for thin surfaces. So you're going to see some benefits, for example, like in the eyelids and things like that. You're going to see a nicer blend. You know, especially for objects that are very like a candle-like, you know, it's like, or jade or something like that, like some stone, types of stone. You're going to see a much nicer result with it. So that's the one I use. And the thing that it does that's different from the random walk is that it seems like the colors come a little bit more saturated when you plug them into the subsurface color, you know. So it's kind of nice to control like that. And then this control right here, this slider, this is basically like how we control going from back scattering to front scattering. So obviously it's right in the middle. So this is scattering just the same between front and back. But I crank a little bit because I want to get a little bit more of a front scatter. I like the result better. Again, not a scientific approach. It's just a visual approach. I like the result that it produces when I do that. So in the spirit of sharing all my settings with you guys, that's basically what I do. Subsurface color, that's where I'm gonna be plugging my albedo later, right? So as you can see here for Stan Winston, I'm not even using like a map in my radius. In the past, I would use, for example, like plug a map, which would be basically like the albedo color, just shifted to this similar color, like this peach color. So I would have some more variations and everything. But at some point, I just like start plugging just the color itself, and I get nicer results, you know. So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm not even plugging anything in there. And then, so the next step is going to be coat. So the coding here, you're going to see I have some map plugged in there, which is the same map I have plugged in my specular. It's basically sharing the same map. But because we don't have those maps just yet painted, we're going to ignore it. We're going to just match the roughness in here. So I'm going to put like 400 for roughness, index of refraction, just to copy. You can be, shouldn't give too much difference. And that's about it. So we just match that one. And then the weight, you're going to crank all the way to 1 here, right? And now I'm going to have to test it. If it's too specky, right? Because you have to remember, if you don't have like a nice displacement map covering the entire face, it's not going to have like any breakups, right? Like in the surface. So probably things going to look very plastic at this point. So, you know, if you look too plastic when I do the first render, we're going to just remove this weight here and just going to bring it down all the way. And then another control here is this sheen, which basically is a simulation. This is a new control. It's not very old. They added to Arnold not long ago. It's to simulate this kind of effect of the like velvet, right? Like if you render something to simulate that there is a kind of like, you know, a little bit of a peach fuzz, super thin in the clothing. So if you look at this guy here, he has that assigned to his clothing, right? So if you look at this, basically like this little halo around here. So it simulates that, you know, it's almost like a Fresnel effect. So you get this little, you know, it's like a closer to the edges, you get a little bit more of like a whitish kind of thing. But in his case here, I'm using a lot of peach fuzz already in his face, and I'm expecting the peach fuzz to do most of the work anyway. So I'm using a tiny little bit of it, just to add a tiny little bit of a rim to help me. If you crank this one too high, it creates all kinds of like weird artifacts. So I would not go too crazy with it. And then the last tab I want to look is this geometry here. Under other geometry is where we're going to plug our bump map later on. Again, we don't have anything to plug in here just yet because, you know, but we can actually I can plug the same one here. Let's see, let's explore this AI noise 1. So if I click on that, it just showed me right here. So those are the settings for the AI noise. Let's plug the same one since we are here, right? Let's just add a micro displacement in here. So click this little box in here. And then you're going to go to Maya because that's actually this is an Arnold shader, so or utility. So you're going to go to I think it's utility or maybe texture. Let's try texture. AI noise. Yeah, it's a texture. So go to Arnold texture and then you click this AI noise. Let's just make sure that's the same. Yep. So AI noise. Click that one. Is that the same? I think I don't remember if it's exactly the same. Seems like it plugged fine. No, it didn't plug. So let's see, AI noise. Let's see how I apply that one. Let's just break this connection here. Let's just open my, just make sure that it's the same one. So under shader, AI, no, texture, AI noise, this guy here. Let me just check. I think I had to plug like the alt color. I probably plugged just the red channel or something like that. Just double check. So stand skin, let's just expand this one. And then let's see how this one is plugged. So alt color AI noise. So yeah, I just plugged the R color into the bump value. So let's do the same here. So let's do it again. So I'm gonna click bump, gonna search for Arnold texture, and then AI noise. And then here I can just say alt color. I'm gonna expand that one. I'm gonna plug just because it's a black and white map, so the red color should be fine. And then that's gonna be for the bump value, right? So bump value right there, and then done. So that should be plugged in now. And then we don't have yet like a way to control the bump depth because we don't have that map painted just yet. But we're gonna tweak this one here to just like match those values. So you're gonna copy this one again, and then I'm gonna try to match that. So I'm gonna click the bump mapping to expand it. And I'm gonna copy those values from there to here. So I'm gonna use 7, because that's like proven already. I already used the same values before and it worked fine. This one should be, I guess you can actually make it like a round number, 129 should be fine. And then 0.5. This was like trial and error. You guys are free to test anything else you want. And so mode here is, let's switch to vector. I don't think it's gonna make a difference though. And but since we are here, right, let's just copy it. So that's basically what I'm using here. So this should give you like a nice little micro bump across the whole face. But obviously we are not modulating anything because we don't have the bump height at this point. So first thing you're gonna do, you're gonna click this little button here to go back one time. And then instead of 1 here by default, just gonna use like a very small value, 0.05. So basically almost invisible. And then once you have the map plugged, then that map is gonna control the depth of it, right? We're gonna modulate. So in areas where you don't have any micro displacement are gonna be completely shiny, right? Like in case of lips and eyelids. And then areas that you want more micro breakup, you're gonna have a little bit higher values in here. So that's about it. So that covers the entire skin that we just reproduced from the previous model, right? So let's assign it and see what happens the way you have it. Obviously, the skin color here, since we don't have an albedo right now, it's completely white, so it's gonna look weird, but we can test it. Another thing you can do here, you see like when I brought from ZBrush, it came all faceted, right? You have all the faces in there. So you can just click the object if you wanna get rid of that. And you can go to mesh display and then just click soften edge. And then that should just like, you know, it's not gonna matter because once you render everything in Arnold, it's gonna subdivide anyway at the render time. And it's not gonna show any of the faces, but just as a visual, you know, thing, just it looks nicer. And then let's try to do our first render with this skin shader and see what happens. Again, like we don't have all the maps plugged, so it might look a little weird, but we don't know. Let's see what happens here. Before we can plug the actual displacement map and see how things are working. So it takes a little bit to calculate because now Arnold is thinking about, okay, I have to subdivide 4 times, right? So it's gonna create like a higher resolution mesh at the end. So once it starts here, then we can actually pause and then just like select a little window and just do a small render area. But let Arnold think for a second. Let me just go back to ZBrush in here and see what we can go forward with it. I think that's it for, you know, to start our tests. So what are we gonna do next? We're gonna plug the displacement map because we're gonna test this area here and see how it's actually working at this point in our first render. Maybe like 4 subdivision is a little bit strong. Let me just reduce this. Let's just cancel for now. And just make sure we get like faster renders. So we're gonna click the object again. Close this one. Click the object, Control A. And I'm gonna go back down here where the Arnold tab is. Remember the second tab and then Arnold. And you're gonna go down and from 4, I'm gonna reduce to 3. So it doesn't need to subdivide too many times since we're just doing a test. And I'm just gonna open a small window, maybe something I can see, maybe the ear and then the nose and a little bit of the lips right there, something like that. Let's see if it subdivides a little bit faster now.
Hey, Chris, can I ask a question?
Not yet. Let me keep it going for a little bit more, so I don't.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Thank you. So so we see like it's gonna be like completely white at this point, and once he finishes this area here, it's gonna go a little bit faster, and then yeah, now it starts like to actually subdividing and showing more results. So it's very white. So let's do a little tweak in the shader just to get the simulation of the skin color here, just for a second. So let's go to our subsurface, and then under color, let's just switch this back. I actually like the HSV here. I have more control like that. So just gonna switch here to a color that's like kind of like a generic kind of skin. maybe a little bit of yellow, a little bit of pink like that, and then maybe a little darker, saturated, something like that. Let's see. No, too saturated. So let's get a little bit less saturation here, a little bit darker. Okay, it's very shiny right now. Just like I said, I mean, like this type of setting is gonna work fine when you have all the fine detail in place, right? But you see how shiny it is right now. So let's do a few things here first. Let me just tweak this one to look a little bit nicer for this test render. So I'm gonna go to coat and just gonna reduce this. And then let's do another render here. And then let's reduce the specular as well. And then once we have our displacement plugged in there, then we're gonna be able to see a little bit better, right? For now, it's just gonna make it look very low like that, so we can actually see this the subdivision being rendered, right? So if I get something like around here, let's see how this turns out, this area. And to be able to judge actually the subdivision levels and the displacement map, it's always better if you can have like just one single light, right? Instead of like having like a global light like this one. It becomes very hard to judge what's going on. So let's do that. Let's just switch to a single light, like the one we had before when we assembled the scene first. So we had the dome light, and we had this little area light here that, in this case here, I simulated, you know, it's like to get similar to the picture I had, but it was too from the front, right? So I'm gonna go a little bit from the top like that. I'm gonna keep it small. And let's see what type of render we can get with that. And then we can plug our displacement map. So you see, this type of light here is gonna actually reveal a lot of the forms in there. It's gonna be very dramatic, right? Like it's a small point. And then you're gonna see like some of the scatter at the ears and places like that. So let's use this one to test our stuff. So I'm gonna cancel it, and I'm gonna plug the displacement map. So we already did the whole shebang for the face itself, right? Like all the attributes. Now let's plug the displacement map. So you're gonna go to your either like to your hypershade and find your shader in there, or if you click the object, it should have, if you're already assigned to the object, it should have it in this tab. So it should be the last one, like the shader stuff. And then if you click that one, first you click this little arrow in here, and that should go to the main node, where you can find the displacement material here. If you cannot find it, another way is to do this. So if I click the object and I'm just gonna do a graph material, select an object, basically like that, those commands gonna be in this top node. So you have your shader in here, and if you click this one here, that's where the displacement material is gonna be, right? But I'm actually accessing it by clicking this one and then this little arrow, right? It goes straight to that spot. So I'm gonna click this one here, and I'm gonna assign our first displacement map. So I'm gonna go to File. I'm gonna expand this one. First thing you're gonna do, you're gonna turn off any filtering I have, because I wanna make sure everything is seamless. So I'm gonna go to Off. I'm gonna go to the Arnold tab. Again, since I'm gonna be using a lot of iterations during this process, I don't wanna generate the TX textures for now. I'm just gonna click that one and leave it off. And then for the color balance, I'm not gonna do anything just yet. Actually, for the displacement, I'm not gonna do anything, period, right? We're gonna be doing some stuff, tweaking in there if I use the albedo color. And then the most important part here would be the UV tiling mode. By default, you have off, so I'm gonna just click this one and switch to UDIM. So that means it's gonna load everything automatically for me. Any number of maps I might have, like any number of UDIMs, it should load in here. Actually, let's keep off just to show the difference. And I'm gonna source the folder where I have my maps, which should be under source images. And now I have 5 maps in there, right? Based on my UDIMs. So if I click any one of them and I open, then you're gonna see a little message in here. It's gonna show, see, but basically like it just sampled that map and nothing else, right? But then if you click this one and switch to UDIM, now it says 5 tiles found, right? So you basically like replace the 005 or whatever that was with a tag called udim, like that. And then now that means that you already found all the maps in there, right? So let's do another render of that same area. Let's get very close in here and maybe do a render like this, just this area here, because that's all we have is sculpted at this point. And let's do a little renders. So yeah, I'm open to questions now. We are entering the second hour. If you want to ask anything.
Yeah. Sorry if I interrupted you before.
No problem.
I have a question which was eating my mind from the beginning of the class. The question was, you exported the base mesh from subdivide 2.
Yes.
But you generated the displacement maps from subdivision 1, right?
No, it's subdivision level 2. If I go back here, so right there, subdivision level 2.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What that morph target thing? That one was for subdivision 1, right?
Yeah, for the morph target, yes, because you want to have to basically like you create the difference between the very base level, right? Yeah, but then to export, yeah, it's just the difference. Yeah.
That was confusing for me a bit.
Yeah, no, very good question. Yeah. And
Thank you.
No problem. And then here, let's do something. Let's unlock the camera. I'm gonna do like a close up because I cannot see much in there. So let's see if we can get some of that detail rendering here. Let's see if it's actually rendering the pores, right? So yeah, it's very shy right now. I can see the pores in there, but it's very shy. So let's see if we can actually increase the number of samples in here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just gonna click this little option box in here. And let's see what we have for samples. So we have 6 in here. I'm gonna crank a little bit, maybe to 8. And then let's just check our filter. 1.5 should be good. So let me just make sure that I have this light here from an angle that I can actually see more detail. Let's maybe like a 45 degree. Let's do the Rembrandt kind of lighting, maybe from here. Something like that. Let's see if we can get a little bit of those pores to show. Oh, I got a little bit too much towards the side. Let's see. Yeah, it's too much on that side. Let's just bring it to the side here.
Hi, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. First, is the first question I made here. My question is more related about the things we saw in the previous class. Concern about your primary forms. I'm the guy who are sculpting Anthony Hopkins.
Yes.
And I start seeing I see your render, your preview from your Instagram or Harryhausen, and I noticed that your primary forms are maybe I'm wrong, but they are pretty stylized, very roundy, and pretty clear. So my question is if and compare it with my approach of the charter I am doing.
Yeah.
I know. My question is, you think that approach of stylizing the forms helps to then, because I see your Dick Smith final renders, and they are very like you see the weights in the wrinkles and all that, but the forms still maintain pretty clear. So you think it's a good approach to go in that way to get when we are trying to make something sorry, where we're trying to match the likeness. if it's I will approach to get that installation for have more clear forms when we finish, and then when we start to break in the symmetry, we can. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
That's okay.
And I don't know if I made myself clear.
No, I mean, like, you're talking about like how clean the primary forms are, and
yes,
and you think they're a little stylized.
Yes, if the approach of stylize the primary forms at first is a good way to maintain forms clear from the final stage, but
yeah,
yes.
I'm actually opening here like this file, the Dick Smith file, so you can look at the model itself. I mean, like, here's the thing that happens, right? When I start those models, I try to keep them very simple and symmetrical at first. I don't have a lot of like secondary stuff going on. I have like some of the secondary forms are just very simple, like you said, you know.
Yes, I know this.
But as the model evolves, there's a lot of complexity that's added to them. You know, it's like I don't think like the final models are stylized in a way. I mean, like
no. Is that what I realized, that I see the final result of the meet and I don't see so much stylization. So my question was if the approach of stylizing at first to have more clear forms, but then when you break the symmetry, you start like breaking all that stuff to feel more natural.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, like, there's a lot that I do. For example, like, this is a pass I'm doing just like to add the pores at this point, right? But But then from this point on, once I have everything covered with the pores, so that's the Dick Smith model, right?
Yes.
So let's see. For example, like if I go to a lower subdivision level in here, or if I turn off the texture, right? There's a lot of asymmetry, and there's a lot of secondary detail and stuff like that that's added. But I mean, like when I started it, it was much more like it was a much simpler form, right? And because I really want to make sure that everything is symmetrical, so I can actually sculpt everything in both sides at the same time, and I don't want to get it's like a lot of stuff going on, right? It's hard to get like over bumps and stuff like that if you're sculpting pores. But then later on, I go back to a subdivision level like this one, for example, which is only like the second subdivision level. And then I do a lot of sculpting around here, you know. Once the symmetry is broken, I'm gonna add all the secondary stuff. I'm gonna start breaking things up a little more. I'm gonna use my clay build-up to actually, like reinforce certain forms and things like that. But up to this point here, yeah, it's like I have like just like 2 days spent on that model, and then that's why I keep it super simple. You know, I at that point I'm not too concerned about like going crazy and matching the likeness one-to-one at all.
It's possible that you some of the wrinkles that you have now in few model are maybe like invented for saving something to match a more to have an idea for where to go before.
I don't know
sorry, after.
What do you mean? I'm sorry, I don't know if I follow.
If the some wrinkles that maybe because we're trying to match something a likeness symmetrically when clearly it's not. So if some decisions you made are not what you're seeing really.
Oh no, exactly, yeah. So basically, like when I'm sculpting, I'm actually consciously just like trying to average both sides, right? I'm trying to sculpt something that actually, it's not quite that side, but it's not quite this side, but something in between. It's just for me to have a base so I can start it's like the detailing. I know it's a kind of like a funny way to approach it, but like I said, I mean, like if you want to go for the asymmetry from the get-go, so you can actually get it's like a perfect match, because it's like if you want to use like some blueprints or whatever you want to do, then by all means you do it. But just remember that before you start adding the pores and everything, it's good if you actually can create a symmetrical version of that model,
Yeah.
that you can actually, you know, like use just for the detailing, right? And then switch at any time back to it. But I mean, like my own approach, and that's why it's called fly on the wall, because I do things in a very funky way, right? And and that's the way I do it. Basically, I average things, you know. It's like, and then from that point on, I start like adding more complexity at each new step instead of like starting with things too complex, you know.
Well, let me say to you that your approach is really helping me out to achieve likeness.
Okay,
It's great.
that's cool,
It's
man.
more free. So thank you, and sorry if I get out of the what I was going and
That's
if I make it too long.
no, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you.
Nothing to you.
And then so here basically, like you see, like because my pores are so tiny, I think I sculpted them too tiny, and I can actually see how tiny they are now. Now I'm actually not being able to see a lot of stuff, you know. It's like if I go a little bit bigger, let's say experiment with this area here. And also my lighting here is not responding exactly like I expected, but let's take a look in here. So let's do this area here. So that's basically the muzzle, right? So you're gonna see a little bit of the orange peel kind of effect in here. And hopefully gonna be able to see some of this, the little micro breakups in between, right? Let's see. So we got that little, yeah, the little, you know, orange peel right there. And you see like when I was sculpting the pores yesterday, I was actually mentioning that if you make sure that the pore itself, like the little hole, it's the main thing, and everything around it is secondary, right? So if you look from a distance, that's all you're going to see is basically the pore itself. You're not going to see too much of the breakup, but the breakup, you're going to recognize it from a distance when you have like all the, you know, the specular hitting it and everything. Then you're going to start to see it. But that's basically like, this is our first render to see how things are behaving at this point, right? Obviously, when you have all the other maps plugged, things going to work better. But then, and another thing that's worked better, it's going to work better is when I start actually doing some, like do those pores a little bit bigger, right? They're very tiny at this point. And like I said, I'm going to have to resculpt it. Let's just get this back here. Now that we are...
Chris, can I make one question?
Yeah, sure.
I have more experience working with the V-Ray shader.
Yep.
And I know that there it's we need to create a kind of modifier to with our object on the scene. It's not through the shader. We apply the different like in the 3D Max was the same. When you apply the modifier on the mesh, and you have the UD dressed for the object completely apart, completely in another way, completely disconnected with the shader by itself. We have some ways to do this with the Arnold render, or this is the unique workflow, or this is the workflow that you find?
I don't know, like I used V-Ray in the past, and there was a bunch of things I had to do. For example, when I exported my maps, I had to use some offsets for my displacement maps to get the right, you know, it's like amount of like rising and going down, right? Like in the and then with Arnold, I mean, like every time I set to subdivision to level 0, and I just plug the maps, it works straight away. You know, it's like I get the results straight away.
You have a better one in comparison with the ZBrush, right?
No, I mean, and then V-Ray, I mean, like I said before, I used was years ago, and it's probably like changed a lot. But I find like Arnold very, very intuitive. You know, it's like everything it's predictable. So every time I change like any parameter and stuff, I can see the results straight away instead of like getting too much into happy accidents. I hear very good things about the Octane render as well. I don't use it, but some people like doing like the GPU renders, right? Like they really praise it a lot. I wish I had a machine that had a bunch of GPUs here so I could test it, but my machine doesn't have a lot of that.
Yeah, but I had problems with my displacement here because I think for some reason, I think I didn't make the same set that you show for us today.
Oh, okay.
And a little bit inflated around the eyes, on the nose, the general inflate on the piece. And I think,
if you use those settings I passed, like for both ZBrush and Arnold, you should be able to get like the results straight away. You know, you should be able to see it.
okay, perfect.
Yeah. So let's see a difference here since we are here. See, like I'm rendering everything here. It looks a little smooth. Obviously, my lighting is not the best in here, but let's do a test. So let's save this one. So I'm going to do like view and then store snapshot, right? So it's saved in there. And let's do that thing that I mentioned before, crank the subdivision levels a little bit more. So you're going to do, I'm going to go here and actually to go to the attributes. And let's crank that one from 3 to 4 subdivisions. And then let's just double check here if my my preferences, this one, if my preferences are okay. So subsurface 3 diffuse, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then adaptive sampling, no. Advanced, I could use this one potentially here. Let's see if it's gonna add too much time, but auto bumping, yeah, SSS, just to see how different it looks like with more subdivision levels and with that option on, just so we can compare between the two of them. And then, back to what I was talking about yesterday, I'm really impressed with you guys doing all the renders already and experimenting with stuff. So I hope, like, starting with this, you can actually plug this into your scene, you know, it's like the same skin shader, tweak the color, and then start getting some actual renders, you know, with the skin shader. Like I said, if you don't have anything plugged, I would just like bring the specular down all the way, right? And then try to get that. So that, I think this is gonna give you a nicer result. I can see from behind there. I think it's gonna get a much nicer result now because I have my more subdivision levels. But yeah, so you can actually do some renders, you know. It's like I know you guys just experimenting with the likeness right now, so you probably like don't want to go like too crazy with anything. But you know, later on, if you have your likeness a little bit more advanced, for example, over the weekend, if you have more of your detail already assigned, like if you did some more pore work and everything, this is a nice way to just like start experimenting with the shader, you know. And then next week is when we're going to start actually painting textures. And I'm going to go through all the channels I'm using. And then when we plug those textures, then things are going to start happening, you know. So just for comparison here, I'm going to switch between those two. See the difference already? It's pretty big. So if I zoom in here, those are the pores like in the new render I'm doing with the more subdivision levels, right? So from 3, I put in to 4. Just like I said, 4 is the one that gives me the optimal results. 5 sometimes is too much. But 5 definitely going to give you more of the microstructures in between the pores, right? If you do that. But comparing the old one that I just rendered with this one, there is a big difference already, you know. This was very, very soft before. And now this one has a little bit more of a depth to them, right? Because I'm actually subdividing 4 times instead of just like 3. So that's important. So that's a good test to just show, right? So let's cancel it again. Since we are here, let's just store it, snapshot. So we have the comparison now between this one and the new one. And now let's just turn off the use auto bumping SSS. And let's see what type of result we can get. If it's going to be much different or not. I believe it's going to be different, but not by much. Hello. And then if it's not by much, then that means like it might be overkill to use it. Yeah.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I will entertain you while waiting for the render.
Yeah.
In which stage you will start to do the wrinkles and like the eye wrinkles and the folds on the like the side of the face?
Tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Because you know, it's like that's exactly what I did in the past class. I did this, you know, it's like I kind of broke up. I had the pores applied, and I want to show you straight away how they look like in the render, and then go through all those settings so people are already aware of it. And then tomorrow, probably gonna be the entire class just sculpting. You know, in the past one, I actually sculpted the entire like one of the eyes, like all the wrinkles and everything. The thing about the wrinkles is that I would rather have ideally all the pores applied to the whole thing, and then before I even start with the wrinkles. But I mean, like, it's fine, you know. It's like going to be.
Yeah, I got this from your explanation before, but I will add another question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Most of them, it will be on like before the HD or in the HD mode.
It's going to be a combination, right? Because you're going to have like the super fine ones that's going to be based like on the HD. And then you're going to have a lot of secondary forms, right? Like, so the bigger wrinkles, like around the eyes, things like that, are going to start building those forms into the non-HD. And then sometimes I can build them even in HD. I can use just like a elastic brush and just bring all those forms back, you know, so actually forward.
Even for like the overlapping, some folds, they overlap each other, especially in the eye and the eyelid. If you did this in the HD, it will be captured in the low-res mesh?
Yeah, I mean, like if you do in HD, you should be able to get like some overhanging stuff, you know. It's like anything that you have in that mode, you should be able to get, you know. But it's not like we're going to be exporting vector displacements, right? So you have to be careful if you have like too much overhang. Maybe like things are going to get a little tricky, you know. Yeah, but so if you can avoid that, for example, like if you're building like a very saggy eye bag, right? So you're gonna try to model like towards the normals as much as you can, and then if you want to add a tiny little bit of overhang, then you can do that. But if you want to planning to do something that really sags, like you know, I don't know, like a ear or whatever, it's better if you can build most of the form into the base mesh, you know, if you're planning to do that kind of stuff.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. You need support, otherwise it's not gonna displace very correctly. Sure. Yeah, so here's the difference. Check this out, like in close-up. Let's just cancel this one, and I'm gonna save another screenshot. So we have the third one here. So this is the difference between this. So basically, like at subdivision level 3, without the SSS in the auto bump, you get this type of result. Subdivision level 4, with the auto bump, SSS in the auto bump, so you get this result. And this is subdivision level 4 as well, without the auto bump SSS, right? So between those two, with and without, that's the difference you have. So you get a little bit more depth, definitely, when you have the subsurface in the auto bump, because everything is going to scatter inside of everything, right? Like, so let's say like Arnold subdivided 4 times, but then we have enough information to cover, let's say, like 7 levels of subdivision here. So basically, like Arnold is going to stop calculating the subsurface scattering when he basically like stops at the subdivision level, but it doesn't go forward with the auto bump information. So this one here actually uses the auto bump information, which is like pretending that, okay, I'm rendering everything, including the super tiny details, right? And calculating the subsurface for it. And this one here basically ignores that. So it just calculates all the way to the top level of the subsurface before the auto bump. You see, like it's a nice, soft, subtle result in here, right? So if I had those pores bigger, because I think they are very, very tiny, if I have them, let's say like twice as big, I would be able to actually see the little wrinkles forming around it. And that's what I'm gonna do tonight. I'm gonna resculpt the entire like face, just like the cheeks. And but actually, I don't know how far I'm gonna go with that, because like I said before, if I look at my references, I can show you here. He has this very kind of like thin skin, and I don't know if I can see a lot of pores in it. You know, you have some pores here in the cheeks, definitely more in the nose, and then but when it gets to the skin itself, it's more like he has a ton of wrinkles. That's for sure. And obviously my references are very low res, right? So I don't have a lot of that to show, but I think I have one here that has more resolution, like this one. Just the lights are diffuse. But you see, like I can barely see any pores, you know. I definitely can see in the nose, but not in the skin. So yeah, this one here I can see more. Let's see. Yeah, some wrinkles, some pores in there, but mostly wrinkles. Actually, everything starts breaking up further here. So I might actually do some work to actually wait until we start doing the wrinkles tomorrow and then deal with that later. Or I can just like add some pores just to have them in there and just like soften them and then start merging them into wrinkles, you know. It's like combining them into wrinkles, things like that. But yeah, but I'm definitely gonna do redo that area tonight. Yeah, I can add some of that, for example, the cheeks and the nose for sure.
Chris, can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
When you show for us that that source from that microscopic
Yes.
textures.
Yep.
And I saw that the pattern is different from the different parts of the face. For
Yes, it
example,
is.
in the nose and the chin and the front head, it's completely different, right? You need
Yes.
to create a lot of different kind of the library of we need to scope the library of the different pores and wrinkles because some ones is completely stretched, another ones is like horizontals, and
Yeah, especially
on the nose is like a dots.
Yep, especially for example, like when I had the expression for the Stan Winston one, some of the pores around the cheeks and everything, I actually stretched them by sculpting the pores to look a little bit more stretched. So I actually cut them so they look more like this. But yeah, I mean, like if you want to go like this is basically the scientific approach, right? This is like the micro geometry of the whole thing. If you want to do like a perfect approach, by all means, I mean, like I encourage you guys to use the reference you find in this website. That's why I pointed you. But I mean, like in my experience, if you're not going to do like a macro photography of anything, it's kind of overkill. A lot of this detail it only works like to break up the specular even further and to get that little, you know, it's like extra layer of specularity. And I mean, like seeing my renders, you know, it's like you cannot see, like, for example, like, oh, okay, I wish Chris used a little bit more of that stretch version here and that one in there. It's almost like you cannot see it, you know. It's like it really adds that little sparkly kind of specular kind of effect. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, like if you approach like very scientifically and use the right types for each one of the face parts, you're gonna get better results. But I don't know, I don't do it.
But this don't make any sense because it's almost the same to project the XYZ, right?
Yeah, I mean, like the XYZ, they have that they have a library of micro displacement as well, right? So if you get like one of this the sets that they have, they provide you with the displacement itself, but they have an extra layer that's super thin that's actually supposed to do this job of the micro displacement. But
like we're doing with the noise under the shader, right?
Yeah, exactly. So if you can find like a kind of like a cellular kind of pattern, you can actually get like a nice result that just breaks up the form a little further. Obviously, it's not like a perfect approach. It's just like to really break up the spec. But it works for me, you know. It's like it's as long as you get that breakup, to me, that's all that matters. And the thing is, like I tried to use some of those maps in the past, and you're always gonna get it's not like a seamless kind of thing, right? Some of them have a little bit better pattern, so it's not like you don't see a lot of it. But most of it, you see like all this kind of like all those little squares, right? Because it's a tiling kind of thing. You're gonna use like a version like this one, but this is gonna have to be multiplied like by 200 across the face or something like that. And then you're gonna end like having this pattern. But when I use like a fractal of some kind that gives me a little bit of more breakup, I can actually have that completely seamless. That's why I kind of opted to use that, you know, and then just modulate with the bump height, just like to produce more visibility in certain areas and then a little bit shallower in other areas. But yeah, definitely my approach is not like, you're going to see like across the board, nothing is scientific, you know, it's like, it's very artistic and trying to interpret the, you know, it's like what you see in nature, but without going like, you know, it's like too much. But at some point, you know, it's like at same time, you basically like you can still do like super close-up stuff for a lot of my shots and still get something that's believable but not perfect, you know. So for example, like you go close here, this is a low resolution, but you can believe that those forms are in there, you know. It's just that definitely not a perfect approach at all. I mean, it's an interpretation for sure.
But it looks good. This is important.
Thanks, man.
This is more important. It looks good. Yeah, you discovered the way to
I mean, like
the reality. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I mean, like all my my approaches, every single thing I do, you know, it's like I'm completely conscious that every single one of them have a ton of room for improvement. You know, if I had to spend time in every single one of those things, I could improve those models much better. You know, it's like do a much better result at the end. But I'm gonna leave this to you guys. I mean, like you're gonna get like basically like all the information exactly how I do my stuff, and then you can go to town. I mean, like if you wanna, for example, like the port looks too simple, you know, it's like you can actually complicate things more. Or if you have like in the previous class, I actually we sculpted a plane with a micro displacement. So we kind of broke up and made like a micro displacement. But then I tried to use it, and it didn't give me a much nicer result than the noise I'm using right now. And then that's why I kind of like switched, because I was getting like some tiling, you know, although I made sure I was making like a seamless kind of tile thing, use some tricks in ZBrush and in Photoshop, still got like some squarish kind of details. So that's why I switched it, you know. But yeah, so let's do this here. Let's see. So I already covered this part. Let me just switch here so you can see a little preview, because my intention is to give you access to all the videos from the previous class. But I don't want to give you the permission just now, because what's going to happen is that you're going to go ahead of yourselves instead of like listening to me. So that's why I'm going to keep it for a little bit more. And but I can show you here just in comparison, for example, what I had. So all videos, and if I go down here to, let's see, load more. So that's all from the previous class. That's the iris in there. I'm going to be exploring stuff like iris right here. And then we are basically around here. So we started yesterday. So we did the pores, which is this one. And at this point here, we did basically what I'm doing now, which is the render. So that's the class we are right now, right? And I had more detail before, because what I did, I actually reused at the beginning some of the detail from my previous model, which was, I think, let me just pause it. So that's basically like I had this detail from another model, but because I adapted it to this new forms, right, of a new character, everything is trashed. So because everything was trashed, I was like, I'm going to trash this. So in my previous class, I actually started by actually eliminating everything. So I completely erased everything, and then I resculpted. So this entire area was sculpted during the previous class. And but that's basically the same thing I did with you guys. You know, it's like I sculpted in here, and then I went straight to Maya around here. And I plugged my, yeah, and this was kind of like the first renders I did. I got nicer results because I had like an albedo color plugged in here. And actually I can do this just to show you guys, although we are not going to be painting any maps today, but I can show you my approach for the albedo color. And that's something that's actually important, what I'm going to say. Because again, like my approach is like, it's how I perceive things, right? How I think things work in the real world, but that's just my perception. So the thing that I noticed, for example, is when you paint something like this, you paint the color map like that, right? And this was painted for another character, so it's going to be different, obviously. But this is my albedo that I painted by hand, right? And I used a lot of some alphas, stuff that I collected, for example, for the micro veins, like I said, I used like some lightning stuff just to help me with that. But most of it was just like hand painted. And then you see, like, what I'm trying to match like an albedo color from my scan, for example, from a light stage. And I'm trying to make sure that the colors are kind of like similar to that. Obviously, you're not like discounting the subsurface scattering that's happening in the coloring, right? So basically, like what's happening is that the albedo is eliminating all the specular stuff. So they're using like some filters to eliminate the specular. But everything that's subsurface scattering is still there. So that means that that color, the peachy color we had, is still baked into the albedo. But there's no way for me to imagine this this color without the subsurface, because, you know, it's like my brain would not work that way, right? I have to try to visually copy whatever I'm seeing, but then I have to find a way to actually discount this color and then replace it with the actual subsurface scattering. So the way I do this here in Maya, I can show you this. And I think this is a good trick, actually, that I don't see a lot of people using out there. So basically, like if I have my ray, that's actually the Stan Winston skin here. The first thing you're gonna notice, let's sample both of them here. Let's frame it. So I have both shader networks now. So I have the ray skin at the bottom and I have the Stan at the top. So I have this remap coloring here, right? So instead of like plugging my my color map, my albedo color straight in the subsurface color, I'm actually plugging this map in between them, the remap color. So let's do this. If you go to Maya and then go to Utilities, you should be able to find remap coloring here, which is right here, right? So this little guy here, I'm gonna plug into this channel that's called subsurface color. So just gonna middle click it, and then just gonna drag and drop in here, right? Or obviously you can just plug the alt color in here and just drag the little arrow all the way there, right? So what this thing does is basically gives you control for the red, green, and blue channels. So you can actually tweak the coloring of the mesh that you're actually the map that you're actually plugging in here, and then the output is basically this one here, right? So this goes in between the map and the shader itself. So when you output it, it's basically like a color correction node that you're using. So if I click this one here, for the Stan Winston one, you're gonna notice that I have those little dots on the red and the blue channels right here, right, at the position 0.5. And this one at position 0.5 as well. So the blue one, I'm actually cranking just a little bit from 0.5, which would be like the default, to 540. So I'm cranking the blue a little bit and desaturating the red a little bit, just to create a little bit of that effect. You know, it's like desaturating a little bit of that baked in subsurface effect in the albedo color. So normally when you do that, the color tends to be a little bit more pale. So before we do this, let's just disconnect it all together and just plug the color the way you normally would plug, just to show the difference. So we're gonna plug the subsurface color here. And let's export this map here, just make sure we have the same matching UVs. So what I did here to create this was basically like I exported the subdivision level 3 or 4. So it was like 1.1 million polygons. And because it was the same amount of same topology, I was able to import in those meshes I had with the color painted for the other passes, right? So every single one of them used the same topology basically. But instead of going HD for each one of them, I only subdivide until 4 million polygons each, and I don't use HD because that would be overkill. So it's just like a simple specular map and then bump height map and stuff. It's very simple maps, right? But not like HD maps. So let's do it with this guy here, which is the color. And I'm just going to rename it. And this should be very fast to export, actually. Ray color 6, just matching that number. And then I can just say, okay, plug in, turn off the displacement, turn on the texture from Polypaint. And you can even do like a 4K in here because we don't have any HD information just yet. So it at least is a faster and smaller map. So just going to export this one, Ray color as TIFF. And this export here should take less than a minute actually, because it's not exporting any displacement map, it's just actual color. So let's wait a little bit. So 2 maps exported. Then the third one's gonna pop, the third one. So I do this normally, export after I do a couple of passes with the likeness, right? I keep exporting back that the highest resolution before HD, I export it as an OBJ, and I keep importing back into those other ones just to adapt them, just so I can see if anything's stretching, right? So just for the color map, it took like 43 seconds to export 5 4K maps, right? So let's plug it here in the subsurface color now. So click that little guy, file, and then turn off the filter, same deal. And then let's turn off this Arnold TX file, textures. And then let's make sure that we get this one. Oh, and if you remember correctly, the displacement map, when we imported it, it was in raw. So there has to be raw. So HDRIs and displacement maps have to be raw, EXRs, right? But when you're dealing with the color maps like this one, albedo, then it's basically a sRGB, right? sRGB is the color space I'm using, unless you're using something custom in your computer. So I'm gonna import this one, and then just make sure that I switch the UDIMs, the tiling mode to UDIM, right? So I'm gonna switch to that one. And now I have a color map. So let's do a quick render just to see how this looks like with the color map assigned to it. Not this one, let's see, where's my, yeah, this one. Let's turn this one off. So now it has a little basic color map in there. We can actually see something. Let's get a little closer. So, wait until it loads everything. Now it's loaded, so it's gonna be easier to just go here. Just gonna render this part around here. So you see, if you have a decent color map, that's when things start happening, you know. It's like you get the, you know, you start getting a little bit of that halo, right? Like the subsurface scattering effect in here. Everything is coming from that color, right? Like the lips are starting to look a little bit better. So it's very important to paint like an albedo that actually looks decent. But again, like this is not the ideal thing because that's doubling the amount of subsurface based like the color, the peachy color, mixed with the albedo color that already has that peach color baked into it. So let's wait until it does a little bit of better job here with the render. I guess a little bit further than this. And then I'm gonna pause this render and we're gonna compare. So let's, yeah, something like that. Let me just, I'm gonna pause it right here. So I'm gonna just store snapshot. And now we're gonna add, so basically this one is without any node in between. Just this is just the albedo color plugged in the subsurface color. So just gonna minimize it. Let's go back to our shader network. And let's sample this one here, ray skin, and then input collections, right? And now let's look for that node. Let's create another one from scratch here. So let's do, so we can copy from the other one. So Maya, utilities, and then the remap color. So let's plug it again. So let's do, click this guy here, out color, and then go all the way to subsurface color. It's actually plugged in there, right? So I'm gonna just eliminate this one. Just unplug this one that we just plugged without the node. I'm gonna plug this one, the out color, into the subsurface color. And then I'm gonna plug the out color of this one here into the, actually I can do this way. If I click this one here, the node, you just drag and drop this guy here into that channel, right? So they're all connected now. So the out coloring here is going to the in color. And then from this one, it goes to the shader. So let's tweak this one here. So like I said before, if I click right in the middle, I can just type 500 here, make sure that's right in the middle. It's easier for me to control like that, 500. And then this one here, by default, would be 500, right? So we'll be right in the middle, but I'm gonna crank it a little bit. So I'm gonna turn a little bit bluish, the color. And then let me just check what's the, in comparison to that, what's the Stan Winston is. So let's just open this one here. And let's see, so this one here, 460. So that's what we're gonna reproduce here. So let's click this guy here. I think, yeah, it's 440, so I'm gonna put 460 right here. So that's basically what I have. I'm desaturating by like 0.040, right? Desaturating the red channel, and then adding 0.040 to the blue channel. So what I'm doing here is basically like, imagine like if, when you look at someone who is dead for a little while, right? That the blood flow, you know, is not in the face anymore. The person is laying down for a while. You get this bluish kind of color in the skin, right? Like the blood flow actually went away. So it's like it's a dead person in there. So that's almost like what we're doing here. You know, it's like we are draining a little bit of the blood from the skin to turn it a little bit bluish, so we can actually fill in with the subsurface gathering again, because we are adding those layers, right? We added the blood and the fat tissue. That's why it's kind of like that peachy color. So let's do a render again, just to compare between the previous one, which was this one, right? And let's see how it looks like now. Let's see if there's any difference, right? It should look a little bit more desaturated. And it's a subtle thing, you know, but it makes a difference, especially like if I was showing this a little bit more like from you know, it's like a wider shot, you would see more. But I can actually tweak this one just to show you, like really, really pull it down so you can see the difference. You see how the colors start changing in there? This is another thing. I mean, like you can play with this. If I increase more red, that's what happens, right? You get like super red like that. But then if I decrease it, you're gonna get more of the green, because the green is still at the middle here, right? And then if I get more of the blue in here, it's gonna get more like this very pale kind of color, right? So if this is another thing you can use artistically as well, you know, it's like depending on your character, you're working a zombie, right? You're gonna add a little bit more of a bluish kind of color for the skin. But I think like I got to that number testing on Stan, which might not work completely for this guy here. Maybe in this guy here, I'm gonna use like, I don't know, like maybe like 580, something like that. and then let's see, 400. Let's decrease it to 450, something like that. And then this one compared to the previous one should have a little difference already. So you see like this one was a little bit more orange and reddish, and now it gets a little bit more pale. So that's a way to use this remap color stuff. But also there's another control in here if you want to check, is this input and output ranges in here. And this one actually is going to define how much you want to output of that color, right? So if you go lower with this, you're going to get less and less of the color itself. So it's going to go more towards the white, right? Like, so this is completely white now. And then you can add more color by using this input max in here. And then another thing you can do is the map itself. If you go to the map itself, like click color, and then I'm going to click this little button. And then under the color attributes here, the color balance, you can tweak the color of your map here as well, right? Like, for example, like if the color gain is white right now, and you want to add like, again, like an artistic approach here, you're modeling the Hulk, right? You can actually, play a little bit of like a greenish color in here, right? And then crank as much as you want to actually get more of that. Instead of like having to change the map in Photoshop and re-import and everything, you can actually play with the color gain in here, Sometimes I do this for my HDRI maps. If you have a map that's too warm and I want to get more like a night kind of effect, I just go and I kind of colorize the map a little bit using the color gain or the color offset as well, right? Like you can actually make it a little bit more pale by offsetting the color, or you can add a little bit more of like, I don't know, any color here actually, like a little bit more yellow if it's too pale, right? You can just add a little yellow in here. Like that, and then I get a little bit more orange tone to the entire thing, right? But again, like this is the kind of stuff that you're gonna have to render, compare to your reference, and then see how much you want to actually tweak in the zebra side of things to match that color, right? And how much you want to do just playing with nodes in Maya, like, because you can actually do a lot just like color correcting stuff just by using those nodes, especially this guy here. This one has a lot of power, So yeah, any questions about this? I mean,
Chris?
Yeah.
Actually, I have a question about your displacement map.
Yep.
In some tutorials that I saw on the internet, just let me open here.
Yep.
Just wait a second. We have a difference here in the color balance that sometimes we have to put a -0.5.
Oh no. Yeah, that stuff. I mean, like in the past, that's basically what I would do, especially with V-Ray, right? But yeah. In this case here, I mean, like if you set the mid value here to 0 and you match this 0 value in Arnold, it should be good to go. But let's say, for example, if you have this by default at 0.5, some tutorials have it at default because this is a 0%, 50% gray, right? Then you're gonna have to create the offset because that, yeah, you're gonna have to offset the mid level, which is the ground level.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So this one, you see, like I just I switched to 0, right? So here in Maya, I can show you what it is. So if I click in the properties of the object and this guy here, and then so in displacement attributes, so basically like it says like a scalar 0 value at 0, right? So that's the one you're gonna have to tweak to actually match if you're using like a 0.5, so like 50% gray, right? But in this case here, it's just matching what comes from Zebra so you don't touch it. That's the default in Arnold.
Awesome. So every time when we use a mid value of 0, we don't have to tweak this into Maya, right?
Nope, not at all. Yeah, awesome. You should get like a 1-to-1. Yep.
Okay.
No problem, man. So let's see this little area here. It looks pretty cool. Let's look at if the displacement is working here.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes. Fala, Maurício.
I have a question for you that does not concern so much the topic that you're covering today about the surface detailing, but I'm kind of wondering how do you find a measure to harmonize the tertiary forms? How can you find that perfect balance in which the forms kind of mix into each other as as sculptors and as passionate for what we do, we tend to go a little bit over the top sometimes on detailing. How can you find that perfect spot in harmonizing those forms?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot comes with observation, right? Like, for example, like if you're observing the form, like the real form, you're going to see, for example, everything follows a hierarchy, right? So you're going to have like your primary forms, which is basically like the structure of the skull, everything in place, right? Like the architecture of the entire face, right? And then your secondary forms is going to start like, okay, so I see like some bigger folds in here. So I'm going to try to represent those bigger folds in the secondary form. And I try not to go over the top, for example, with if I'm sculpting wrinkles, I try not to invade that space, right? Unless I want to go, for example, like to the major wrinkles and put them in the secondary forms, everything has to respect the previous level, right? And and a lot of times I do this mistake, you know, it's like I kind of go overboard with some of the tertiary detail, and it starts like invading a little bit of the space of the secondary stuff, and then I end up like going a couple of the subdivision levels back, like 2 or 3 subdivision levels back, and I smooth that out. So when I go back, I'm gonna show this probably tomorrow when I'm sculpting the wrinkles around the eyes, because it's a very, very clear example of what you said. You know, it's like I'm gonna get some of this detail in there, and then some of them are gonna get too deep eventually. And then I'm probably going to go back like maybe like 2 subdivision levels, smooth it out slightly, and then go back to the highest, and then it should look fine, you know. It's yeah, I don't have a technique. I mean, like it's mostly like respecting the next level every time, kind of like breaking up the form as you go, right? Instead of like going too strong.
As you go along from primary to secondary and tertiary and so on, you have to always keep in mind that you don't have to erase what you've done previously, right?
Exactly.
Because you maintain those primary and secondary forms always very clean for us to see from a distance.
Yes, exactly. So at all times, I mean, like if you're sculpting likeness, right? At all times, it's good to just like, especially like if you had a little lighting. Let's just do a preview shadows here that it's off for me. So if you have something like this, you have to make sure that if you go far away from your model, right, you can actually recognize the person. And then if you're not recognizing, then something is not quite there just yet. So, you know, it's very important actually to nail the likeness from like a tiny little spot like that, right? Sometimes you can get like, you get excited and you put a ton of detail, like you said, you know, it's like you're trying to nail, for example, like the position of the wrinkles in the secondary forms more than nailing the primary forms and the structure of the face. And then all of a sudden, like it works fine from a close up like that. But then if you start spinning around and turning, you know, it's like, and all of a sudden, like the model doesn't look anything like the guy anymore. So, but it is a trick. It's a tricky thing, man, to actually keep this respect, you know. But you see,
I've decided to mention it today, even though you're not concentrating on that topic.
Oh, it's important, yeah.
Tomorrow, you mentioned that you're gonna you continue to sculpt on those main forms, right?
Yes.
So maybe tomorrow it would be kind of important if you keep that in mind for us to tell how do you find that harmony between the forms?
Yeah, definitely.
It would be really, really great if you kind of gave the lesson with that in mind.
Yep, exactly. I can do that. Yeah, like I said, I mean, like, since this is not like a traditional media, right? A lot of those things mix. So for example, like when I was sculpting this guy here, it was a mix between like the primary forms and secondary forms, kind of like all wrapped in one, right? It's not like I was actually trying to nail the primary forms first and make all the planes are reading. I was actually adding a lot of the secondary forms. In the same way I'm going to do with the tertiary forms. I'm going to be working with the tertiary plus the secondary at the same time. So it's kind of like, it's always like working at a transition point, you know, primary, secondary, and then secondary, tertiary, almost at the same time. But I definitely going to approach that, what you're saying, you know, especially in those areas here that you have the secondary form here for the eye bags. And then you're going to start adding a lot of the tertiary stuff in here. And then at some point, you're going to have some crossover, some stuff that's like a little bit of a tertiary, secondary forms, and then tertiary mixed with them, right? So it's going to start modulating that stuff. And but a lot of the stuff I try to get in the likeness I try to approach before I go even HD, you know, for example, like the secondary stuff in here. It's in a good spot. It's not perfect, but at least like I have some of the forms to guide me in there. And yeah, but it's a great question, man. I think it's very important too.
I watched Jill Neptill's class one time in which he concepts about water balloons.
Yeah.
Thinking the human organic forms as water balloons, kind of mixing into each other and intricating between each other.
Yeah.
And since you've worked together for some time, do you have that same methodology while you are sculpting?
Not a lot. I mean, like the ZBrush stuff that Gio got into, I pretty much like introduced him to ZBrush, you know. Like, so I was actually talking about the concept of using the clay build-up for that same reason, right? Like what I was talking about, because he was a mudbox guy. And then when I was talking about like the clay build-up, I was talking about that. For example, like the forms are basically like, it's not like they are isolated, right? They kind of like, they roll into one another. So that's why when I was sculpting this stuff with the clay buildup, I was showing the difference between using the regular standard brush and the clay buildup, because you want to make sure that they collide with each other. They have this, you know, they kind of like pressing each other, right? And yeah, but I mean, like he has his own different approach. That's why I guess it's good to take classes from multiple people, because we all think differently, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
I have a question. When in your process, in your pipeline, you would like your step you are in? I mean, for example, you say when you reach to this level in your primary and secondary and tertiary shapes, then you have to lock your model and go to detailing your pore and those kind of stuff. And for example, you say after you've done your skin pores, you have to lock your model and go to texture and go to. Do you have any locking stage like that, or no? It's non-destructive pipeline.
You mean like lock one thing before you move to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, would you come back and edit your, after you rendered and after you poly painted everything, would you come back and, for example, refine your primary shape, not primary shape, secondary shape or tertiary shape?
All the time. It's a process that never stops. So for example, like this is not linear at all. Of course, I'm trying to make things a little linear so you guys are not scrambled, like your brains are not scrambled. But you know, it's like really introducing you guys like very early on to the renders, not as a way of like saying like, okay, from here on, we're just gonna move on from this step and gonna go to the next one. That's just like assembling a scene. That's your test scene, right? So everything I try to do, I basically I do not compare anything to my ZBrush, what I see in the viewport of ZBrush. I always compare everything to the render itself, because we are trying to simulate like a physical object, right? There's no better way to judge something than something that looks physical. That's a nice lighting and everything. So I can actually judge the forms and all that stuff. But it's a constant thing. For example, like all the way to the last minute with Stan Winston, that model, I was actually probably like the last day I worked on it, I probably generated like maybe like 3 or 4 different versions of the texture, like the albedo color, maybe like 3 different versions of the sculpture itself, like tweaks I did in all levels, like from the micro level, if I need to add like some microstructure in the HD level, or going back to a level like this one at 1.1 million or even lower, something like 69 like that, and just like really tweaking the secondary forms and the primary forms at this level, sometimes going all the way down to the lowest and tweaking some of that stuff as well. So it never stops, you know. That's the beauty, I think, of the, you know, having access to multi-resolution in ZBrush, is that it becomes something that's completely flexible, you know. It's like you can work in primary, secondary, tertiary forms at all times without like this need of like, okay, let's nail one by one, you know.
Exactly. And I'm asking because we are kind of studying portraiture, and we if it was destructive pipeline, and we were screwed because we have to come back and detail, make all those scheme ports.
Oh yeah. But I tell you, like it's like the thing is, like I try to add the pores when I'm kind of like semi happy with the model, in a way that, for example, I know that the form is going to change, but it's not going to be like a drastic change, right? Like some of the major volumes in here, they might like shift side to side a little bit here on the sides and everything, but not to the point that it's going to create a stretch that looks completely artificial, you know? I'm hoping that from this point on, any stretch that I do is going to be kind of like carefully, of course. I'm not going to be doing like stuff like side to side, you know, it's like dragging stuff like that, pulling topology side to side, right? And destroying everything. But if I'm careful enough just moving stuff around, it's almost like what you expect when you're animating this character with blend shapes, right? Like you're going to get some of the skin sliding and stuff. So if you do consciously, especially if you're working with facial expression, right? You're going to try to move stuff like in a way that, okay, it's following the structure of the muscles, right? Yeah, it's like some of the stuff you're going to need to tweak from time to time. Sometimes if I do like a drastic change, let's say like in the top eyelids, I'm going to have to see what it looks like at the end, you know, it's like for my displacement map and my HD geometry here in ZBrush. And then if it's stretching in a certain way, I'm definitely going to do some tweaking in there. So all the way to the final moment when I have a model completely assembled, and let's say like, okay, I'm happy with both my primary, secondary forms, and also the detail is good. Then actually just the primary, secondary, but the detail is not perfect because there's some stretch that happened in there. I gotta go to that specific area and gonna tweak it, you know. But at all times, like I said, like I'm gonna have like a Maya file like this one. So you see, like with the color now, it starts to work and gets some interesting result. I'm gonna have this model set in this scene here from now on all the way to the end of the class. So that's gonna be the scene I'm gonna be working on. And everything I'm going to be doing in terms of tweaking is going to be based on the renders I'm getting right here, you know. Yeah, it's going to be like a back and forth constant, like between color painting and sculpting and all that stuff. Because, yeah, the process is so, to me, it's like that's what makes everything so fun, you know. I don't have to actually nail anything at this point. I can actually have something that looks reasonable at this point and then refine every single thing as I go all the way to the end. But I understand that you guys might think that's it's a little funky way of working, you know. And like I said before, I'm not here to tell you guys like do this way because this is the right way. I'm here just to expose you guys in a different way of working, you know. Palomita, when she did the class, she posted even like in her Instagram, she posted like I'm kind of like having to learn how to walk again, but she was posting as a positive thing, you know. It's like, okay, that's a different approach that actually opens a bunch of possibilities I didn't think about before, right? But definitely not the approach that she used because she comes like from more like a traditional kind of background. So I think anything you guys can use to incorporate to your own workflows and make your models like look better. For example, like if there's anything in my shader network that can help you guys, great. If it doesn't, then stick with whatever you have. If there's anything in the way that I sculpt my stuff, like with a mix of primary forms, secondary forms, and then secondary and tertiary mixed together as well. If it doesn't work for you guys, stick with whatever works, you know. What I'm saying is like, this is the fly on the wall thing. I'm working the way that I normally work. And I'm pretty sure you're going to get lots of insights in the middle of this. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of stuff is not going to make any sense to you guys. But really, this is not like me preaching, you know, it's like this is the right way to do anything, really.
That's a good fly, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like a lot of people are going to come up definitely with everything in terms of like a structure of a class, right? They're going to have everything nailed down to the T, you know. It's like you're going to nail the primary forms in here, and you're going to avoid doing this and that and that. And then you're going to look at the final result of the work produced, and it's not going to be maybe that great, you know. It's going to look like, okay, well, I saw that this person is using all those techniques and everything, and I can see them in practice in here, but the final result maybe is not that impressive. And then you got to look at other dudes doing stuff in a very alternative way, and the final results are better. So it's up to you to pick, you know, it's like what you want to do. You want to do it's something that it's very like you know, it's like a structure in a way and very scientific, or something more free, you know, it's like that you can actually experiment and you're not like constrained to a lot of stuff, you know. And I tend to believe that my class is very open in a way that it's like ZBrush, you know. It's like if you come from Maya background and you use ZBrush, at first it's like it's this completely wackadoodle way of doing things. But then when you learn that you can do the same thing like in a lot of different ways, then it opens up like all those new possibilities, you know. And I tend to believe like the way that I approach this stuff, it might look a little wacky, but the final results are good, you know. It's like you can actually see that there is a lot of quality in the final product. So again, like use anything you can and just dispose anything you don't like, and that's fine with me. That's why we don't have actually, you know, it's like a homework or anything like that. It's just like, you know, I try to give you feedback on whatever you guys are producing. If you're focusing on the likeness, I'm going to give feedback on that. If you're focusing on the primary forms, I'm going to try to give feedback on that. If you're focusing on the fine detail, I'm going to try to, you know, give feedback. And then at the end, when you have all the pieces together, I'm going to try to give feedback on what's missing to actually make that image pop and make more realistic, you know. But yeah, it's a fun ride, man. Just you guys, yeah, just enjoy the wackadoodleness of your teacher.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I think we are 11:35, so we are done for tonight. I'm gonna save this movie as usual and make it available to you guys as soon as possible. And I'm gonna jump right back to my model, and I'm gonna focus on fixing the size of the pores. Because like I said before, if I just go back here and just do a little preview, you're gonna see how close together they are. And it's just because I was working in a small area yesterday, and I started in this small area instead of like looking at the whole, right? And really trying to get the distance between them correct. And obviously, like for the distance for them to look correct, always look for references like that one I showed you guys yesterday, right? This website that you can actually go and zoom in all the way, so I can actually see what's acceptable. You know, it's like in terms of a nice distance between the pores, you know, how big they are in comparison to each other. And obviously, this guy here has those giant ones. But like if you look at those guys, they're kind of like, you know, has a fairly nice way to just like measure those distances there as an average, right? See like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, you know, and then there's a bunch of different ones from different ages. Some of them are very clean, actually, some younger people. So yeah, have it. And once you actually, I saw some examples posted in our forum, our group today. Let's see, Facebook. They actually, I think it was Alejandro actually who did a nice attempt with the pores. He covered a huge area already, which I was pretty impressed by. This one, okay, so this is Plasmixia. I don't know how you pronounce your name. And then you have this one here, right? And I thought it was like the distance between the pores, at least in this area here, it looks pretty nice, you know. Maybe it got a little spread out in here, but it looks pretty, you know, it's like, I think it's pretty convincing here. Then obviously in this area here, you're gonna need to work again because it looks a little weird, but here it works pretty nicely actually. So I'm gonna have to go for something a little bit more on that size of pores, but that's it for now. Thanks again, guys, and I see you very soon around the group and also tomorrow in the class.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.